Welcome to Church of New Beginnings. We're just so happy that you are here with us today, and we're just excited to know that this is the first day of spring. Yeah, the first day of spring, y'all. And so we just want you, I hope that it's warm wherever you are. I mean, it's different temperatures everywhere and everything, but we we're just happy to be with you again, and thank you so much for tuning in to Church of New Beginning. All right, as usual, we ask the question, "What are we going to do in 2022?" So I pray and trust that we're going to do everything within our power to increase uh, the body of Christ and lead others that don't know Jesus to the body of Christ. All right, let's go ahead and jump in to our text today, which is going to be taken out of the book of Numbers, chapter 30. 13. I don't know where I'm to a step here, but Numbers chapter 13, verses 30 through 33. And this today we're going to be using the King James version of the Bible. Um, in verse 30, it says, "And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it.' But the men that went up with him said, 'We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we.' And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, 'The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. So we were in their sight.'" All right. Today I want to talk from the subject, a call from outside the comfort zone. A call from outside the comfort zone. I guess kind of the best way to get started with this is to use the illustration of the temperature of a room. I was told several years ago that the average temperature in a conference room is set for men in a suit, and that's around 72 degrees. Okay. With that in mind, some would not be comfortable. Okay. Some people, if you got it at 72, will not be comfortable at 72 degrees. But have you ever noticed in a church, ladies just be fanning with those church fans? And when I see a deacon get up and adjust the temperature, I know someone has complained about how hot it is in the room. All right. Let me share something that happened to me a few days ago. I had arrived at the Georgia Sheriff's Association Chaplain Division Conference, and I got my room assignment. And when I got to the room and everything, the room was a little cool to me. Okay, I had the room to myself, so I didn't have to, I have to be concerned about somebody else being just right for them or being too hot for them or whatever. So I could adjust it to whatever I wanted to. I raised the temperature, and I ain't gonna tell y'all what I raised it up to, but they had I guess it was a humidifier. They had that in there. I turned that on when I turned up the heat because I knew that it was gonna get a little dry in there, and so that might affect my sinuses. So what did I do? I turned on the humidifier so it would be a little moisture in there. Okay. Well, the next day, all right, I'm in the classroom, and it was again chilly to me, and I know it was not 72 degrees. So I started looking around, and I wasn't the only one that was looking for it, y'all. So don't just think it's something funny going on with me. Uh, But there were others who were looking around to figure out where the air vents were. And for some reason or another, it seemed like they were just blowing on my neck. Okay. So I looked on the sides and I couldn't find it and everything. But I found out that the vents were behind me up in the air. And so they were kind of positioned where they would blow at the back of my neck. And so I had on a jacket and everything. So I kind of, just made the adjustment, or somebody else maybe made the adjustment in there because it was a little cool in there for those of us who were inside the room. Okay. Let me share another story with you, and then we're going to get into the text. I read a story not long ago about a man who was named Larry Walters. Larry Walters. I don't know Larry. Don't know when this story was written, but he always wanted to be a pilot in his in the armed forces, but his eyesight was not in a position where he should be a pilot. So he couldn't see good enough to be a pilot. So he became a mechanic in the Air Force. After he retired, he got this idea one day at an Army surplus store, and he bought a tank of helium and 45 weather balloons. Okay, a tank of helium and 45 water balloons, weather balloons rather. And then he strapped the balloons to his lawn chair, which he had staked down to the ground. And Larry just expected that to drift slowly for a few minutes. And when he cut the rope holding the ground, the chair and him to the ground, he shot up rapidly, and finally he leveled off at 11,000 feet. Okay, so he went from the ground to 11,000 square feet. Eventually, the Coast Guard helicopter saw him, and they let a line down to him, and they were able to tow him to the ground safely. Well, once Larry was back on the ground, he was asked, why did he do that? And he said, a man can't just sit around all of his life. All right. I think that's going to just kind of shoot us into, tap us into the direction I want to go. He said that a man can't just sit around all of his life. All right. So in other words, his comfort zone was on the ground, but what he wanted to do was experiment some area that was not his comfort zone. Okay, so we talking about an invitation outside of the comfort zone. All right, so in Numbers chapter 13 and 14, it tells us a story of a people called the Israelites, and they had come to a point where they were comfortable in a particular land called Kadesh Barnea. And God had given them everything they needed. All right. So they were comfortable. But now he was getting ready. God was getting ready to call them out of their comfort zone. He was getting ready to call them out of their comfort zone. So what I want you to understand today, as we look at this, all of us have been in our comfort zone. And there have been times that we've been called to do things that make us uncomfortable. So when we had to come out of our comfort zone, when we go out of our familiar territory, when we are away from our surroundings that we're comfortable with, and when we call out that, sometimes God does that. God calls us out. All right. So I've got like 3 points I want to share with you today. I want to talk about the challenge, the complications, and then I want to share something, a conclusion that will speak directly to each and every one of you. All right. So let's look at the first point that I need to share with you. We need to look at the challenge. Okay. In Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 through 3, which we didn't read in our text. Okay. God initiates. Now let's just show you where the challenge came from. It didn't come from a basketball team, it didn't come from a football team, baseball team. God initiates this challenge, okay? The first verse of this chapter makes it plain that God was who it was sending his people into the place, the land of Canaan, in which he said, I am giving to the children of Israel. Not only that, but it was God who prepared what they would find when they got there. He had already created blessings, a land that flowed with what? Milk and honey. And he also had the problem that was there, the giants in the land. God was in total control of the situation. God already knew what they were going to see. God already knew what he had prepared for them. All right. So what we see here is that, okay, God was in control. God initiated the challenge. So we're talking about the challenge. It came from God. Okay. So God's people, meaning the Israelites, investigated the challenge. Okay. You'll find that in chapter 13, verses 17 through 25. They chose representatives to go and spy out the land God was calling them to. All right. Now, God already knew what the land looked like, but he wanted the people to look at the land so they could see what they were going to get themselves into. All right. Now, so Moses allowed the people, he had them to choose 12 people. In other words, 12 spies, the one from each tribe, to go out and look at the land. Now, one of the things I like that's real specific about this, when Moses told them to investigate, he gave them specific questions that he wanted answers to so they could report back to the people on these particular questions and the answers. All right. So in other words, it was not like they could just go and make up stuff and come back and what have you, but he asked them specifically to check out different things. Okay. So it's just like, you know, if you go in to buy a car, you one of the first things you might do is you look and see a car that the color you like and all of that. And then when you kind of drawn to that car because of maybe the color or something about that car, what will you do? You would then look at the sticker price, okay? And then those of you that are great people in negotiating, you would start trying to get the salesperson to bring the price down. But here are the questions that Moses said, okay, this is what I want you to do. First of all, the first question he said, I want you to see what kind of people were we going to face. So that's the first thing. And verse 18 tells us he wanted to see what kind of people. All right. The second thing that he wanted, what kind of land are we going to be entering? That's in the A clause of verse 19. Okay. The third question, what kind of strongholds? Are there walls or do they live in tents? So in other words, are the people, if they're strongholds, that means that they plan on staying there. If it's tents, it means that probably that they will be temporary people. But so three questions. Let's go back over the three questions again. What kind of people we're facing? Okay. What kind of land are we entering? All right. And what kind of strongholds are there? All right. So we want to know what kind of people are there. We want to know what kind of stronghold. What does the land look like? Does it look like it's going to be flourishing and what have you? Okay. It is important to note that God's people were obedient at the beginning of this challenge. Okay. There are several implications to see in this passage. God is in control of the challenges he put before us. Okay. Notice in verse 2, if you go to 13 and 2, it says, the land I am giving. The land I am giving. All right. Now, when you look at that, you notice that that's in the present tense. He didn't say that the land that I will give you. He said the land I am. I am means right now. Okay. I am giving you right now. Now, another thing I got to point out with that, He didn't say you got to take it or whatever. He said, I'm giving it to you. And typically when you have somebody giving you something, you don't think about you got to fight for it and all that kind of stuff. You know, somebody said they're going to give you $1 million. You just expect for them to just give it and what have you. Somebody going to give you a car, you think they're okay. They're going to just give me that car and everything. All right. The principle here is simple and yet missed by so many Christians. We are called to do much for God, but he has already prepared the way for us to do all the things. And all we are called to do is to walk what? In obedience, so God can accomplish those things in us through his power, not our power, but his power. All right. The Lord sent the spies through the voice of Moses into the land, first so they could see what they were getting into. So it was not like they were going someplace and they were going to take the whole millions of people there and nobody would know what it would look like. God already knew what it was going to be like, but he said, let me just let those, the children of Israel, let me just go let them see, you know, what they are going into. All right. Now, sometimes, you know, some people like surprises, some don't like surprises and what have you. And so we kind of want to know. All right. So first thing we see in the text was the challenge. Okay. So they go and they look at what they were going to be faced. All right. So let's go to point number 2. Point number 2 is this. Point number 2 is the complication. The complication. So first we saw the challenge, and now we want to look at the complication. All right. In verses 26 through 39 of the same chapter, the report comes back. All right. Now, those of you that, you know, when you were in school and stuff, sometimes you didn't like when the report card came out because you didn't want your parents to see that you wasn't doing as well as you thought you could do or whether how, you know, well you should do. All right. So, you know, nowadays they have a progress report to come out that kind of let you know in advance, you know, how the child is doing so you can make some corrections. All right. Now, this was not really, I don't think this would be considered as a progress report, y'all. I think this would be just kind of a report that's coming back. Okay, the report came back, and Israel faced a great challenge, as do we. They faced the first part of that challenge, but then the spies report came back, and you see that in verses 26 to 29. The people had to be anxious because the spies were gone for what? 40 days. Now, I've heard people say, you know, when people are on trial, if the jury comes back quick, sometimes it doesn't mean too much. It's not in favor of the defendant. But if they stay, sometimes it may not be in favor of the defendant because that means, and then if the defendant is maybe charged for murder, he or she thinks, well, it was taking them longer. Maybe they're thinking about this evidence a little bit more, but if they come back pretty quick, that may not be a good sign. They gave a glowing report, showed off the huge fruit that they had brought back with them. But let me just stop long on that. Y'all know the story. There was grapes, some humongous grapes, not like you buy at the grocery store. It took 2 men with a staff that carried these humongous grapes. I have no idea how big those grapes were. I don't ever think I've ever seen any grapes where I couldn't pick them up by my hand. Okay, so they said, okay, first of all, they told about basically Moses had 3 challenges: find out about the land, find out about the food and stuff like that. But the first thing they address is talking about the land. They talking about the land actually what flowed with milk and honey because they see the evidence because of the fruit, because of the grapes. They were so huge. But then came those fateful words, nevertheless, in verse number 28. Now, nevertheless, kind of means something like but. Okay. Now, fellas, do you remember a lady that you may have loved, you dated, and all of that, and you was, maybe thinking about it going somewhere else and maybe getting more serious and all of that. And after having a conversation with it, she ruins the whole thing by adding the word but. And then she says, but let's just be friends for now. Now, I realize that she said just for now, okay? But your bubble has been busted because of the fact that you are thinking about getting serious with this lady, and she's saying, let's just be friends. Not a word that you want to hear from a lady. And maybe the same thing with a woman when a man says, I just want to be a friend with you. I don't want to be anything else, right now. All right. Right now means that in the future there might be something. Y'all remember the movie Dumb and Dumber? There's a line in there where whatever the guy named Alan somebody was trying to date this girl, and she said she wouldn't go out with him. It was one out of a million chances or something to that effect that she would date him. And he said, one out of a million? At least I got a chance. Even though it's one out of a million, I've got a chance. And there are going to be complications when someone throws, like I said, that word but into the conversation. All right. The spies explained the complication they saw in following God into the promised land. Okay. First, there were giants in the land. Second, those giants lived in fortified cities. In other words, they were strong. They were walled cities. And finally, those giants appeared to be everywhere. Now, I use the word appeared to be everywhere because of this. That's in verse 29. It talks about they saw them, and as far as they were concerned, they felt like they were what? Grasshoppers when it came compared to those giants. Okay. Now, I don't know whether you've ever had this situation, but I know my mom has told me about this, and I know that this happened with me as a child, and I'm sure that it's probably happened with my children and stuff. But do you ever remember a time when a child, your child, wanted a particular pair of shoes or something else? Okay. And what they would tell you, because you didn't really want to buy the thing, maybe it was too expensive or whatever, and they would tell you everybody has them. They tell you everybody got them. And even when you were a child, you knew that everybody didn't have whatever it was. I remember my mother telling me a story, because back when my mother was young and stuff, they had to wear these high top shoes. We call them brogans, okay? And mother was telling me a story once. They came home and told my granddaddy that all the girls were wearing the low cut shoes, and they weren't wearing the high top. So they said everybody got the low top. The girls ain't wearing these hot tops. Well, my granddaddy, he gave something I thought was kind of cute. He said, well, so and so parents will have to pay the doctor bill when they go. I won't have to pay it. So in other words, you're not getting the low top shoes, okay? But they knew when they were saying that everybody did not have them. And we all face the same thing when we follow God outside of our comfort zone. There are giants out there. All believers face giants of unbelief. We face giants of ignorance, and we face giants of what? Laziness. Sometimes we don't want to do something just because of ignorance. Sometimes it's because of unbelief. Sometimes it's just because of laziness. And there are people in our lives who will turn to God. Will not turn to God. There are problems they will have will be way bigger than we are. And they're coming to you with something saying this is going on and everything, and you'll try to be what? Telling them they need to turn to God. But for some reason or another, they don't want to do that. Not only are there giants, but there are giants deeply entrenched and fortified. We face problems that just won't go away. And everywhere we turn, we run into more and more giants. Brothers and sisters, accept the fact that you can't run away from the problems of life. You must face the problems, what? In the grace of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. We need to respond to the problem. Now, here in verses 14 through 30 through 14 and everything, you find that there was a response. And this reminds us of the response to our giants, as is the real issue here in Numbers chapter 13. Most of the people responded in fear. Y'all hear me? Most of them responded in fear. They protested. Those giants were just too big for them to face. They were just too big. Their attitude was, we had rather be comfortable in failure than uncomfortable in victory. Let me just say that again. This is their attitude. We had rather be comfortable in failure than to be uncomfortable in victory. When all other excuses fell short, they just blamed their leaders. Now, I heard a pastor say, an older pastor say to a group of us back in the 1980s, he said, if the project is successful, the people say we did it. But if the project was not successful, they say the pastor did it. I think that's probably even true even in 2022. But now you got 10 people saying about the giants. They did say, the land is good, but there are giants in that land, and we look like grasshoppers. But there were 2 people out of the 12. All right. What, maybe 2% of the group? I don't know. Joshua and Caleb responded in a different way. They didn't deny that there were indeed some pretty fierce giants to face if they obey God and cross the Jordan River. But they had their own eyes on God rather than what? The problem. So they were saying, God done told us it's our land. So we're not going to be faced upon the problem. We're going to be looking at what God said. They had to go in because it was God who was sending them there. Surely God could be trusted to be faithful to his word. This is the vision we all need to face to have the challenges of life. It is our vision of God that determines, y'all hear me? That determines our response to the challenge. I can do all things. That's what Philippians 4:13 says. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You will not need to fight in the battle. Position yourself, stand still, and what? See the salvation of the Lord. That's all he was trying to get them to understand and to see. What God is calling you to do. What is he causing you to do? That would take you out of your comfort zone. Can I share a personal story with you? In May of 2006, I felt God was calling me to establish the Church of New Beginnings. Okay? And this is what I'm telling you. I asked God this question. I say, why, God, didn't you put this in my head, put this in my spirit when I was in my 30s? Why didn't you do it at that point in time? Why didn't you let me start the church when I was in my 30s? At the time this came into my spirit, I was 55 years old. And I'm saying to myself, I'm too old to start a ministry. If I'd been 30 years old, that would have been a different thing, but I'm not 30 years old. So therefore, I think I'm too old. But you know, God always has an answer for everything. So what God did was spiritually had me to remind myself of Genesis chapter 12, actually chapter 11 and 12. And in chapter 11 and 12 of Genesis, there is a man that is called Abraham. And at the time God called him, he was 75 years old. And God called him out of his comfort zone and called him to start a brand new nation at 75 years old. So at the time that Abraham was being called out to start a nation, he was 20 years older than me. 20 years. So after he did that, my excuses went away. I couldn't use that as an excuse. Let's get back to the text. Joshua and Caleb knew that the only safe place in life is where God is. God may not be inside of your comfort zone. He was not inside Joshua and Caleb's comfort zone. All right. Now, I want to move to my third point, and I've got some things I need to mention to you, the conclusion. And I know I've been running a little bit long here, but what I want to do, and is I want to just kind of deal with something. We talked about the children of Israel going into the promised land and what they were dealing with. But what I want to do now is I want to kind of focus on some of the issues that we have, that we are facing. And so y'all just bear with me just a little bit. When I was at a conference the other day, we had a speaker that talked about sometimes we don't deal with the things that people are dealing with. And so I want to talk about some things. Maybe this will help you shift from your comfort zone. Let me just start out by saying this one, the first one. Be aware of what's outside of your comfort zone. What's outside? What are the things that you believe are worth doing, but you're afraid of doing yourself because of the potential of disappointment or failure? So a lot of times we don't do anything because of what we are afraid of the failure. And I believe that's why Moses wanted them to go look. He wanted to see. So be aware of what's outside of your comfort zone. Now, there are people who have grown up in a city and a state, and they have never gone out of that city, and they've never gone out of that state. They have no idea what it's like to be in some other place. Okay. I grew up in the South. I grew up where we had very little snow. And I've, met people when I was working with people, and they was talking about how they used to shovel snow and everything before they got up. Before they left home every morning. I said, man, how could you do that? And they just said, Al, I just thought that's the way it was everywhere. We thought everybody did that. Another thing is to become clear about what you are aiming to overcome. Be clear. What are you trying to overcome? Okay. You shouldn't be just doing it because somebody else is doing it, really. Okay. But are you afraid to walk up to people and introduce yourself in social situations? Are you, is that one of the things that you're trying to overcome? That you have problems, introducing yourself to some people? I know some of y'all, just social butterflies. You don't have that issue, but there are people. I know some people that probably listen to me right now. You got a problem with that. Why? Why do you have that? It's because you are insecure about the sound of your voice. Sometimes people, because I hear people talking, I can't listen to myself being recorded. Why? Because they don't like the way they sound. They don't realize how they're coming across to other people. Are you insecure about your looks? Is there something about you that you're insecure about? Maybe you think you're overweight. Maybe you think you this. Maybe you think you're that. Okay. Maybe you think you ain't got the best kind of clothes or whatever. So you just don't you don't introduce yourself. Okay. Or are you afraid of being ignored? Sometimes that happens. People just ignore you. Okay. Get comfortable with discomfort. I need to say that again. Get comfortable with discomfort. One way to get outside of your comfort zone is to literally expand it. Make it a goal to avoid running away from discomfort. I know this kind of hits me because I'm one of these kind of people who don't like discomfort. So this is a thing that I myself need to work on as well. Then the next thing is see failure as a teacher. When you fail, see that as a teacher. Many of us are so afraid of failure that we would rather do nothing than take a shot at our dreams. Y'all done heard me say this plenty of time. I wanted to play basketball on the high school basketball team. I never made the team. But y'all know what? I was so silly. I went out every year, even though I didn't make it. I didn't ever give up trying to make it. All right. I went out every year. I didn't make it. Okay. But you got to take baby steps, take small steps toward the fear you are trying to overcome. Let me just share this one with you. Prior to about 1974 and 1975, I was afraid of dead folk. I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't, I was afraid to be around dead folk and didn't care too much about going around funeral homes and man, you wouldn't see me going behind the funeral home where they park them ambulances and hearses and stuff. I wasn't gonna go through that. So I came to a conclusion that the only way for me to overcome that fear was to work for a funeral home. Okay. So y'all know my friend Greg Levitt. At that time, he didn't have own a funeral home. So I said, Greg, ask Shebub. That's what everybody calls his dad. Ask Shebub if I can work at the funeral home. Because I figured if I worked at the funeral home, that fear I would overcome that fear. So one day we were hanging out down at the funeral home because it was a duplex. One side of it was the house where they lived, and the other side was the funeral home. Yep. Shebub knows lived in the funeral home. They had a door that came out of the house right into the funeral home. So instead of Greg asking Shebub, could I work there? He says to Shebub, Aldrin has something that he want to ask you. Okay. So I had to ask. So I said, I want to work at the funeral home. I didn't tell him I was scared, but he said, you really want to work at the funeral home? I said, yes, sir. That's what I want to do. And believe me, I had my chances to overcome that fear. All right. I won't bore y'all with the gruesome details and stuff that I saw and everything, but there were people in the funeral home. A guy by the name of Billy Williams. He was a deacon at my church. And he pulled a trick on. He blocked me one day from being able to run out of the room. But I didn't want to see what was going to come next, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. But, they were messing with me. All right. Another thing you need to do, you need to hang out with risk takers. Hang out with risk takers. There's no substitute for this test. Now, if you want to become a person who learn how to take risks, you need to hang out with people who know how to do that and who have done that. So find somebody who risk takes it, and hang out with them so they can encourage you. If you want to become better at something, you must start hanging out with people who are doing what you want to do and start emulating them. Okay, I got to throw a quick story in here. 1980, I started to work for a company called Rollins Incorporation, and there was a guy in there by the name of Earl Geiger. Earl Geiger was a vice president, executive vice president. He was the sharpest guy I knew. At that time, I wanted to be a vice president. I don't know about an executive vice president, but I wanted to be a vice president. So you know what I did? I started hanging out with Earl Geiger. I was, he was the best dressed man at Rollins. And I used to tell him about how sharp he was. And then he would say, well, somebody got to add some class to this place. And I went out and bought the book, Dress for Success. All right. So I would hang out with Earl Geiger just to kind of learn what he was doing. Be honest with yourself when you are trying to make excuses. Be honest with yourself. Don't say, I just don't have the time for this right now. Instead, be honest and say to yourself, I'm afraid to do this. I'm afraid to do this. There are things that you want to do that you are just afraid to do. All right. I was afraid when I first got my motorcycle to ride it and lean and stuff, but I got pretty good before I sold it. Identify how stepping out will benefit you. You need to understand, what is this going to do for me? What will the ability to engage in public speaking do for my personal and professional growth? So in other words, if I start speaking out publicly, I know people that I've known pretty much all my life that would not do things like stand up in front of people in the church, and now they ain't got no problem doing that. But they had to do it, taking baby steps, okay? Don't take yourself too seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself, okay, when you make a mistake. Sometimes you just got to laugh because you done made a mistake. Be happy to roll with the punches when others poke fun. Roll with the punches. Laugh at your own self, okay? Focus on the fun. Enjoy the process of stepping outside of your safe boundaries. Enjoy the fun of discovering things about you that you didn't know about. The final thought I want to share with you, it will seem really scary at first to get out of your comfort zone. But as I said, you don't need to jump out, full force into your discomfort zone or out of your comfort zone at once. You need to what? Take baby steps. As you push past your comfort zone, you'll feel more and more at ease about the new stuff which seems to be dangerous to you. God bless you. I hope this helped you to help you to move out of your comfort zone. And if you're listening to me today and you have not accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, here is an opportunity to ask the Lord to forgive you of all your sin. And then say, I believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is the Son of God and God has raised him from the dead. I want to just share something. I've been praying this week about the body of Christ, and more seriously than I have, because I've been hearing some things, that pastors are going through, churches are going through, and I've been disturbed by that. So all I know how to do is pray and ask God to deal with it. I want to send up, special prayers for our church and other churches where there are sick members. But I specifically want to lift up my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, Francine and Pap, during this period of time, because she's gone through some health issues. And I'm praying for her, praying for Pap as you have to deal with the situation. I want to pray for my cousin, Pastor J. Philip Baker, who has been in the hospital. He's at home now, but I thank God for him, and I pray that God will touch and heal him as well as Francine. Now, y'all know I always close out with Numbers chapter 6, 24 through 26. That's what I'm going Numbers chapter 6, verse 24 through 26. I'm not going to read that, but I want you to look at it, and I just want you to know that we love you here at Church of New Beginning, Church New Beginning members and members. We love you, and God bless you, and enjoy your spring day. And let's continue to just believe God is doing something at this time. I believe that he's shifting us out of our comfort zone. And for the last couple of years, that's definitely been happening. But I believe that God is doing that to us for a reason. I can't tell you what the reason is, but I want you to know that I want to continue to keep the word out. And I pray that the Lord will continue to show up like he's always done. God bless you. We love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Thank you. See you Wednesday night in the Word Wednesday.